Okay, so that's basically the brief rundown on the Tada form in its past tense version. Now we're going to move on to the more common version of the Tada form, which is the hypothetical form. So basically, you can construe the Tada form as being in the hypothetical sense when the second clause, C2, is in the non-past tense. And in this version of the Tada form, C2 can actually be an intentional act or whatever. You can freely represent an intentional act in C2 when we're using Tada form in the hypothetical sense. So you'll note that in the previous version, the past version, we sometimes were interchangeably using when and after, even though the direct translation would be after something happened. We would sometimes change that after to when just because of a more natural flow. In this version, we can actually interchange if, the if aspect of the hypothetical factor of this Tada form, with when as well. So in this hypothetical version of the Tada form, when we translate the lines into English, we could just as much use when as we could with if. However, if you as the speaker wanted to, you could kind of cement that stronger sense of if as opposed to when in your sentence just by simply adding the word moshi in front of the sentence or whatever is applicable. And the word moshi is actually a word that itself means if. So it kind of just cements that idea, even though there is a kind of double sense of using if in a sentence, but that's just the way it works. So that may have been a kind of convoluted explanation of this, so we'll move on to the examples to give a more intuitive idea. So for our first example, we're going to give an idea of this being in the hypothetical version, but more appropriately translating to when something happens instead of if something happens. And for our example sentence, we have the line shukudai o shi owattara nemasu. And what this line is translating to is just basically, when I finish my homework, I'll sleep. If we break down the sentence bit by bit, first up we have shukudai, which means homework. We have o, marking homework as the direct object of the verb that's about to come, which is going to be the verb shi-owaru. And shi-owaru is the compound verb of the verb suru in its premas form shi plus the verb owaru, which means to finish. And we covered this in a previous video, how to use the premas form of verbs plus owaru to mean finish doing that verb. So this is going to translate to finish doing. But we also conjugate the owaru end part of the verb to owatta, then subsequently into owattara. And so then this is going to translate to when I finish. And when I finish what? When I finish my homework. And following that first part of the sentence is simply the second part, which is just going to be nemasu, which means I'll sleep. Neru is the verb to sleep. Nemasu is the polite present tense or the future tense in this sense, and it will be I will sleep when I finish doing my homework. And so you can see here, just given the factors of this sentence, we can't really use the word if, even though this is technically the hypothetical version of the Tada form. The word when is the more appropriate and natural choice here, because if you say, if I finish my homework, I'll sleep, what does that imply? That implies, well, that you might never finish this homework assignment that you have for the rest of your life, so you'll never be able to sleep again, which can be used in a figurative sense, but in a literal sense, it does not make too much sense. And so with that, we choose the meaning when I finish my homework instead, because there is kind of a certainty that you'll finish your homework eventually, no matter how long it takes. On the other hand, we're going to modify that example we use by just a little bit to show how the construct or the context of a sentence can change when into if as the more appropriate usage. So for our next example or sub-example to the first example, we have the line shukudai o hayaku shi owattara terebi o mimasu. And this sentence is basically saying now, if I finish my homework early, I'll watch TV. Let's break down the sentence first and foremost. Once again, first we have shukudai, which means homework. We have o marking homework as a direct object. We have hayaku, which is going to be the e adjective hayai modified into an adverb to be hayaku. Then that's going to modify the verb that follows it, which is shi owattara. And once again, we know this is the Tada form of the verb shi owaru, which means to finish doing. And this would have translated to when I finish if this was the first example, but now it's going to be if I finish. And that ends the first part of the sentence, and we move on to the second part of the sentence, which is terebi o mimasu. Terebi is television, o is marking as the direct object, and mimasu is the verb miru, to watch in its present or future polite tense, mimasu. So altogether the sentence is, if I finish my homework early, I will watch television. And so with this modified sentence, you should be able to see how if makes more sense than when here, because if you use the sentence, when I finish my homework early, I'll watch television, that sounds a bit less natural than if I finish my homework early, I'll watch television. Okay, we are now going to move on from using the hypothetical version of the tada form with verbs into adjectives and nouns now. And before we do that, there is a tidbit information we need to know, and that is the simple statement that when this form is used with adjectives and nouns, it is just almost always interpreted as being the hypothetical version of tada as opposed to that past version of tada that we mentioned in the past. And so for our first example, we're going to use an E adjective, and our line is 楽しかったらもう一回したいです. And what this is going to translate to is just basically, if it's fun, I want to do it again. Let's break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have 楽しかったら, and this is the E adjective 楽しい, which is going to mean fun or fun, basically. It's going to be modified into its tada form, which means it's going to first need to be modified into its ta form. So tanoshi turns into tanoshikatta, and that is going to add the last character ra right after it to be tanoshikattara. And so that's the first part of the sentence, and this is an adjective, so we kind of already know that this means if instead of after. So if it's fun, mo ikai shitai desu, and the word mo is going to mean again, ikai is going to mean one time. So once again basically is what those two words are going to translate to, and shitai is the tai form of the verb suru, so basically it translates to want to do, and then we have des to end the sentence, so that second part of the sentence is going to translate to I want to do it again. And so altogether it's going to be, if it's fun, I want to do it again, 楽しかったらもう一回したいです. For our next example sentence, we're going to do a not-adjective now, and for our line we have the sentence もしそのクラスが好きだったら取った方がいいと思う. And what this line is saying is just basically, if you like that class, I think you should take it. Let's break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have もし, which is going to mean if. We have そのクラス, which is going to be that class. We have ga marking as the subject. We have the not-adjective ski, which is going to mean like, and that's going to be a not-adjective. And so now what we do to turn into its tada form is we add basically des right after it, and then we conjugate des into its tada form, which means it needs to be conjugated into its ta form first. So the ta form of des is going to be datta, and then we add the character ra right after it, so dattara. And so now we have そのクラスが好きだったら, and that's going to be the first part of the sentence, which translates to if you like that class. And so now the second part of the sentence is going to be 取った方がいいと思う, and this is going to be the grammar construct that we covered already, which means you should do the verb that we use, and the verb that we use is 取った, which is 取る, to take in its past tense. After 取った, we have ほ, we have ga and i, then we have tomo, which means to think. So basically, I think the method of taking is good, which more naturally translates to you should take it. そのクラスが好きだったら取った方がいいと思う. If you like that class, I think you should take it. Now for our last example sentence, we're going to use a noun, which is basically going to follow the same guidelines as not-adjectives, in that all you have to do is really just add des right after the word that you're using and conjugate des into the tada form, which is dattara. So for our example sentence, we have the line 日本語だったら理解できる. And this line is going to translate to, if it's Japanese, I can understand it. And so we break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have the word 日本語, which means Japanese. It is ended with the des, and that's going to be conjugated into its tada forms. And so des turns into dattara, and then we have the second part of the sentence, which is just going to be rikai dekiru, and rikai suru is the verbal noun that means to understand, but we're going to want to change it into the potential form. And so we conjugate suru into the potential form, or its potential form, and so it turns into the word dekiru, and now we have rikai dekiru, can understand, and add that to the first part of the sentence. If it's Japanese, I can understand it. 日本語だったら理解できる. And so yeah, that ends the basic coverage of the tada form in its two meanings. The first one being the past tense, and the second one being the hypothetical or conditional sense. And of course, we also covered how this grammar construct can come at odds with a number of other grammar constructs in the past tense version. It can be interchangeable with the toki ni or the teikara grammar construct, but also it has some conditions in which you can't use it and have to use the other ones. Similarly, in its conditional form, it kind of rivals the ba conjugation, and in our previous video of the ba conjugation coverage, we mentioned how the bot form itself has some little restrictions that you can't use it in, and thus you would have to use this ta form instead. So there are a lot of distinctions amongst various grammar patterns, and it's always very good to know how to use them and when to use them, because if you mix them up, then basically you will be conveying something that you probably don't want to express.